Welcome back to The Remote Life. My name is Han Talbot, also known as Han Meets World, and today we'll be chatting with Sophie Bailey. Originally from the UK, Sophie is co-founder and CEO of WorkTripp, a company that produces team offsites that build connection, culture and creativity. In this episode, we talk about offsites and what leaders need to know about them, as well as the UK remote life industry and how destinations can benefit from offsites also. So grab a coffee, a tea or something stronger, and let's get started. Sophie, welcome to the Remote Life podcast. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you, Han. It's Monday, which is fine, is a good thing. I'm raring to go after a lovely weekend with some family. And great to be here. Thank you.
No, it's been great to have you here. It's been a while since we last saw each other running remote, right? How did you find all that?
I really loved the event. It was, as you know, in a fantastic location, and we have beautiful weather, and it's always a real experience when you get people together who perhaps some of those people know each other and some don't, but you're all there for a common purpose and to thrash out what this new way of working looks like. And it's always a good opportunity to get stuck in Lisbon and enjoy what Lisbon has to offer. So I especially enjoyed, there's a fantastic company called, I think they're called Go Tours. But anyway, they organised a run on one of the mornings. So we had a fabulous run along the waterside there and taking in some of the sights of Lisbon as well. So yeah, good stuff.
It did look amazing. I wish I was somebody who enjoyed running, because that would have, I'm sure, been such an amazing opportunity to network with people while seeing obviously such a beautiful city. So yeah, best of you for that. We'll talk more about what you've been up to a bit further into the podcast, but should we kick things off straight away and just tell us a bit more about you and your remote life journey so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm firmly in the geriatric millennial categories. I guess it blows my mind that some of this, wasn't around when we were younger. And so we're sort of, my kind of parallel there would be, our parents telling us when they got their first television and that kind of thing. But I was thinking about this in prep for this podcast. And I was thinking that I think it was around 2012, 2013, so I was working in an events company, so putting together, researching, conceiving and developing brands for big areas of technology. So, where technology intersected with different, what we would call then industry verticals. So whether that was healthcare or how we organize our cities or, how we pay for things. And I remember once coming into this office and the CEO standing up saying, we've got you all laptops now, and don't forget to bring them in when you come to work, which is quite funny because, of course, as soon as you have a laptop and you realise, well, especially in that business, you're travelling a fair amount. Well, actually, why the questions start to naturally come, why would I always come in? And actually I'm feeling quite tired from that last event we did, so what if I could just actually finish this at home and that kind of thing. So that was the kind of early experience. And then to roll forward to 2016, very similar story to many people. So I had my first child in 2014. I was listening to podcasts at the time to keep up with the sector that I was working in. So I was in the educational technology sector, and I would push my son around in his pram and whilst he was asleep, listening to different podcasts around EdTech to keep up to date. And basically what happened was, when that maternity leave came to the end, I went back for 6 months. I was sort of commuting an hour each way, getting dragged into meetings that I didn't really feel like that I needed to be in, and essentially having quite a stressful existence of leaving the house at 6:30, being the first person leaving the office and all the politics around that, and then picking up my son who was really hangry for an hour of time with him, which didn't feel right, just to put him to sleep and start working again. So basically all of that came to a head, and I quit my job. And in fact, I launched a podcast, and that evolved into something that could pay the bills happily. And, that was very, very much a remote experience. So that was for the last sort of previous 7-8 years. And that meant that I could work 3 days a week, earning the same amount of money pro rata as my employed job. And I got to travel. I took myself out to South by Southwest and recorded there. I was moderated panels in Beijing and got to experience and live and work all over the shop, but also on the day-to-day have lots of time in and around my family. So yeah, that was a very happy experience. And then just very quickly, I kind of got to the end of that coming out of lockdown, and I was like, okay, I've done this for 7 years. And by that point I'd had a lockdown baby as well. And I was kind of thinking, well, what's next? And I'd consolidated what was the, really amazing fact of when I brought people together through events. And then, also this amazing benefit of working remotely and in this new world where so many more people are experiencing this, how do you kind of sustain it over the longer term? So that became the new idea bubbling around, and what eventually evolved into WorkTripp as well.
That's really awesome. I love hearing about different people's journeys, and it's just so interesting how so much of it kind of in some format revolves around flexibility of work and being able to choose your lifestyle. So that's really exciting and so inspiring. But yeah, obviously WorkTripp. Let's talk about WorkTripp. Tell us about it and how did it come to be formed?
Yeah, so exactly that. So just to go in a bit deeper. So the first 10 years of my career were in business technology events. And so I've always been really interested and loved, the idea of how you convene people, how you bring them together, how that's done in a way that makes their kind of heart sing as opposed to their, people close up. And I think we've got better at that as the years have rolled past, and we've kind of discarded the bits of traditional work or like very formal environments that don't particularly always serve us well. And then, like I mentioned, the last 7 years were running a podcast, and that was all around educational technology and innovation in learning. And through that experience, I noticed this trend from this kind of technology will save us ethos, which is very much Silicon Valley, like how do we throw technology at the problem and everything else will be solved? Like that's how we're going to solve everything. To a little bit more of a sophisticated understanding that life is messy and actually sometimes we need to slow down in order to get to our best ideas. And it's amazing. We can access so much information and opportunity online, but also there's a sort of limit to that. So we saw during the pandemic that it was amazing that we could all, or not all of us, but a large proportion of us could access remote work and our children could continue their learning, or we could continue our learning at university online. But the sort of social aspect, the ability to hug one another, all of those almost sometimes quite intangible things really count for something. And so I was, I'd been doing the podcast for 7 years. I absolutely loved it, developed an amazing community, but I was kind of also thinking, right, what does the next 7 to 20 years look like? And what's the challenge that I want? And so I was reflecting on the fact that, I have this experience in events and bringing people together. I'm interested in how that's evolved, and I'm interested in how, if we're going to work in distributed teams, and I noticed that, many of those best distributed teams do use offsites, then how do we create something that serves those teams to do that in the best way? So, that could be making sure that there's a sort of intention behind why they are meeting. But also when I spoke to a lot of potential customers in my sort of research phase of the idea, lots of them said, their own experience was sort of bouncing around a lot of consumer facing websites. So the websites that we might choose to go on a kind of group meeting with our friends, but isn't necessarily the same one we would use for a company organising an offsite. And what is happening now is people are meeting more frequently. So this task of organising an offsite is having a higher business priority. It's suddenly quite more of a critical investment in the organisation. It's happening more frequently, but the people that execute it don't get any more time. So what if we could create a kind of infrastructure for them that helps them do this in a really creative, imaginative and impactful way, and goes beyond the idea of just booking a venue, which was kind of like the predominant experience to date. So that was the idea. And I'm kind of like a year and a half or slightly more in. And it's been lots of fun and lots of learning to date. So that's the backstory.
Yeah, and just for people who might not necessarily know what an offsite is, do you want to walk us through maybe sort of a vague day in the life of what an offsite is?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, imagine everything you think you know about team building, and especially the bits that make you cringe, and then sort of rip that up and start again. And for me, the offsite has certainly evolved out of this predominance of distributed work. So if we imagine even, all of that's on a spectrum of different versions of hybrid to pure remote on the other end. But as a result, you will want to be getting your team together probably quarterly. And it may be different depending on the size of the team. And this doesn't have to be like a whole company endeavor. So it may be that, for example, your sales and marketing team are meeting, or your senior leadership team are meeting. But so imagine, I don't know, anywhere, a number between sort of 20 and 50 people getting together, meeting in a neutral location. For us, we always try and encourage environment as like a very important factor in all this. So rather than perhaps the old world of like a conference hotel that, yes, they're very efficient, but is that the thing that's going to set your employees' hearts alight and motivate them and give them that sense of unique belonging aligned with the culture of your organization? Probably not. So we try and find like incredible venues set in nature that are still really accessible from airports or other transport links. And an offsite really is a chance for those teams to get together, to cultivate that sense of connection and belonging. And, we're not of the mindset that you cannot develop that remotely, but we just view an offsite as a way to give you that, additional boost. And so if you have that opportunity, why not take it? Because your competitors certainly will as well. So you're getting together. You found this fantastic location. Crucially, I think the old world would be, let's pack this whole day full of content because we've got to make the most of the opportunity cost of everyone being here. And then the new world is very much, actually, we're here. We don't get to spend this time together on a daily basis. So this is really special and precious time. So predominantly the scheduling should be around opportunities for teams to connect, to have a bit of unscheduled time to really get to know one another. And so you may have a good portion of the programming dedicated to that, with lots of opportunities. For example, we love like long table lunches where people can really connect over that experience. And then the other thing is like, absolutely recognizing the kind of diversity of your team. So for some people, those experiences supercharge their batteries. For others, they'll have a bit of that and then they'll need their own time. So being mindful of factoring in lots of like options in your program as well. So I would say a mixture of, we have 5 different categories on WorkTripp, but connection and belonging is a big one. There are other reasons and scenarios that companies or teams get together. So for example, if there's been a merger and 2 different cultures are kind of integrating, that's quite often a time that you need to build the kind of psychological safety of those 2 teams in order to perform at your best effect. Another one would be onboarding. So we know that it can be challenging to onboard people remotely. And so perhaps every quarter you kind of get those new starters and bring them together and allow them to kind of really make the most of meeting as well. And then there's things like pre-board meeting for senior leadership teams, quite often one where they'd get together, connect, get aligned, work out what the new drivers are, and again, can be kind of forward planning and goal setting as well. So there's a whole range of scenarios, but the main thing for us is very much like recognizing the value in bringing the team together, number one, in a natural environment, and then really focusing on the team as opposed to individually. So that doesn't mean that we don't personalize our programs. We absolutely do. But, really recognizing that our kind of worldly, social and business challenges are interconnected. So we need to kind of really develop interconnected thinking in our teams as well. But yeah, whether we call them offsites, corporate retreats, company retreats, there's so many different terms. But I think it's just, recognizing that value of bringing people together and it not being purely in a meeting room or environment, that it's kind of like the commitment to the deeper thinking. So, we're not there to just kind of underline existing thinking and then go home. It's a space and time outside of the task-driven nature of our work to do some sort of deeper thinking as well.
It sounds a bit more intentional than, say, like what has been my experience of corporate team building as well. I know that the 2 times I think I ever was part of those kind of activities, it was I got like they were trying to do something, but I know for myself I came away and was like, what did I get from this, like in terms of my professional development? Or like
I think that's important, right? Because we know that, like, I know there's a sort of stereotype in these demographic labels, but if we use the Gen Z label for a moment, we know that younger people in our workforce are really, really hungry, especially for upskilling. They're really hungry for opportunities to develop and to continue to develop. And, rightly so, because they will be smart and will be looking at the volatility of like the technological landscape that they're facing, the challenges economically. And so they want to equip themselves with their very best chance of navigating that world. And from a business point of view, it makes absolute sense in terms of offsites as well, because we don't want this attrition of soft skills. We don't want this attrition of how to stand up and speak publicly, and whether with clients or internal comms or whatever it is. And then on top of that, you'll have all of these, fast changing technical skills as well. And so the offsite in that way can be a employee benefit in terms of, we're showing you a commitment to this model of working. And this is about investing in you, and, you're able to experience the best of flexible and distributed working, but also we're going to make sure that doesn't just mean you're out there and that's it, that we will really kind of hold you as a really key part of this team, and that you'll be brought to get back together regularly, but like also be able to benefit from the best of that world as well. So yeah, I think sometimes that old world of perhaps like Segway riding and all of that stuff, I find it's like deeply embarrassing, because it completely undervalues like the contribution, the collective intelligence of the workforce. So yes, we want these incredible, amazing experiences, but it's really about cultivating the ones that person's going to hold in high esteem, both in terms of like you gave them this opportunity to continue to travel and connect socially, but also to improve themselves, like to kind of develop and challenge themselves. So I think that's the sweet spot that we like to get into.
I think there's also a lot to be said for remote teams and having social time together, because I know for myself, if I hadn't, with a few clients that I work with now, if I had, for example, say, been on actual calls where I could see their face, or like actually had a one-to-one or like in a smaller setting call with them, I wouldn't know how to take their then online communication, for example, say on Slack. And I feel like there's a lot to be said from just spending time with each other, even if it is like 1 to 2 days every quarter.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by this idea. And obviously we've all read like the studies about body language and what percentage is inferred from this, that, and the other. And my two kind of nerdy examples are going back to running remote. So when people post on LinkedIn, 9 times out of 10, it's like extremely edited. They're triangulating, what will I say that hits with my intended audience, that will go well with this, that, and then weighing up all of these things, working out what image to use, all of that. And you get a kind of like palatable version of what they're saying usually. And then when you meet a running remote, you have those back channel conversations, you have the after hours, and you find out what really people are motivated by and what they think. And that's why I sort of love podcasts, because I think the best ones capture that same kind of radio signal of what people are really thinking when they're done well. And then, to the same effect, I went to Glastonbury recently, and I was kind of reflecting on when you hear a produced song and a recorded version versus when you hear a live music version of that song. And partly the brilliance is in the imperfection. It's in the fact that they might play a note slightly differently, that they've got this kind of wild interaction between the crowd and the act on stage, and it's it's rehearsed but then unrehearsed at the same time. And so I think those two examples sort of are why I think it's so important, because otherwise everything can feel a little bit two-dimensional, and as I say, it can become task driven, because it's one of the best things about working remotely on a distributed team. You can get on with your work in a way that you're not constantly interrupted, hopefully, if you've got your culture and like operating system all set up correctly. But then you should also create moments which are about that interruption and about that ability to just connect in a way that isn't rehearsed or one-to-one. So yeah, I think there's merit in both, and it's like previously it's been weighed towards the form, like that constant interruption, which is not great either. So yeah, that's my waffle.
No, it's definitely super useful. We're definitely in an interesting time, and I wonder personally like how much the pandemic has kind of also pushed this, is the fact that at the end of the day we are still like social beings, and even like people who enjoy being by themselves as opposed to staying in the office with like lots of people around them, there is an element of coming together as a team and making just have that kind of cohesiveness and creating that kind of opportunity for that bonding with your team on another level. And I think I wonder if like the pandemic has maybe pushed that a little bit more, because we literally were isolated like for so long.
Yeah. And I think, I think I have like mixed feelings on it, because I think that we've turned away from having to get all of that connection from our team to having the time to do more in our own communities. So maybe we've got more time to care for people or do a project locally, or so there's kind of like knock-on benefits. But from a team point of view, absolutely. I like the people talk about like teams being like we're family, but I prefer the idea that it's like a sports team. So you're and partly that is about cultivating this real sense of like shared history and collective moments and memories, and what that how that converts into a sense of sort of culture as well, and the fact that you will have each other's back in different moments.
And becoming the best in the league.
Yeah, exactly that. So yeah, no, I think the pandemic did do that. It kind of, it just gave us this moment to go, if we're going to re-architect work, what serves us and what doesn't, and what do we want to turn up the volume on, and what do we not want to, what do we want to turn down, essentially. And you're still seeing that play out now. And I think it's the discussion and the challenge and the noise comes from the fact that it's completely different for all of us, because we're in different stages of our lives. We have different life experiences. And yeah, therefore we don't all experience this in the same way. But I do think the both the business and the individual and social benefits of distributed teams are going to mean that's an increasing element of how we work, and therefore we need to kind of think about, or how do you really sustain that longer term? And so that's why we believe there's an opportunity for WorkTripp in terms of supporting that over the longer term as well.
We're definitely, I think, in a very interesting time, because I think obviously the whole get back into the office thing is creeping back into the news again. And I think we're in a very interesting time where it's almost like, things won't always, it was never going to go back to how it was, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But we're in such an interesting time now where we do get to literally rewrite the rules and look at how could the work life be moving forward. So I think it's such an interesting concept to then be having, WorkTripp, for example, coming in and being a part of how we could, what the team life could look like next, as opposed to, say, having to do things like one way fits all that we've been doing for such a long time. So.
Exactly that. And I think outside of all these orthodox camps of, remote only or office first, I think, I have no problem with this idea of flexibility, like autonomy and connection that's been spoken about. And I think that's the thing. And I truly believe in it, because everyone has challenges in their lives, and many of us have sort of experienced them once you get to this grand old age. And those moments would be infinitely more difficult if you have to kind of squeeze them into this framework, which is frankly ludicrous. Like it just doesn't make any sense when it's so sort of top down. And so that's why I really believe in this world of work. And it's then about, how do we make sure that we don't lose out on the best bits of like coming together, of travel and adventure, and this true commitment to sort of peer-to-peer learning as well. And like I said before, it's not that you can't do some of that stuff online. You can, but it's just a different level of experience. So yeah, it's exciting times, I think.
Yeah, I think it's going from sort of, again, this sort of one way of doing things to, okay, how this, I don't mean this quite literally, but it is, because it's something I would champion. It's about understanding how your team can best produce results, and going from there versus going, okay, well, we've done this for X amount of decades now. This is how.
Oh yeah.
Like,
we spoke to a really interesting company. They had a good way. They talked about, we don't really mind how you work, but it has to be customer first, then team first, and then you. And I thought that was quite interesting, because there's been a lot of discussion around like what I want. And actually, if you reorder it in that way, you can still work and you can still benefit from lots of the distributed team elements. But it is different also depending on, are you part of the customer service team? Are you part of the sales team? So yeah, there's these different frameworks to approach it. I really liked Chris Hurd's reflections at Grow Remote in Ireland recently, and he was really kind of challenging everyone in the audience not to be complacent that this is now a given, that, there's a lot of lobbying going on, obviously, to kind of get people back to cities, but also to recognize that, don't kind of give too much credence to the big tech headlines, because they are in this absolutely unique position of massive cash liquidity, and therefore being able to demand, like, actually, we'll pay you this much, but you have to come in every day. 99.9% of companies are not in that position, and therefore are more interested in how they can use different levers to attract talent, and for their own like cost reduction, overheads, and agility. So yeah, the headlines are sometimes a bit distracting in terms of the scale of what we're talking about versus, where we're ending up. I think what is quite interesting is, Nick Bloom talks a lot about sort of settling somewhere in between and hybrid. But what's quite interesting about that is you do then lose some of the benefits of attracting talent from wherever if then you have to go back into the office a few days a week, because you're naturally going to end up more tied to that location again. So I think my own stance on it is, let's see, of the companies of the future that are getting set up, what is their kind of trajectory? Like, are they getting set up remotely? And then does that change as they hit like a traditional kind of scale up stage? Do they start doing that what was normal thing of buying office space, or do they carry on? And I think, so in like 5 to 10 years time, we'll have a really interesting view on those new like post-pandemic startups and what that looks like. And I think that's going to be really interesting to sort of determine where things land ultimately.
Definitely. I think also there is I think there's probably a pressure of some sort for a lot of people to feel like they must go like all in on remote as well. And I feel like it should also mention that like just because it is currently something that looks kind of a bit flashy on social media, it's also, of course, like the whole point is that it's not for everybody, and it's just about again championing and highlighting that everybody's sort of way of working is different. It is individual.
Yeah.
It's about aligning with those companies that also highlight that, I guess, and figuring that out for yourself too. But we mentioned, I just wanted to touch upon this because obviously you mentioned a couple of events you're doing, and obviously like if people have hopefully distinguished where we're from at this point, that we're both from the UK, have a background in the UK industry, and we sort of touched upon this when we first had a virtual coffee. But we talked about the remote work space like an industry in the UK. Do you think, like, what are your thoughts on that? Then, do you think there is a remote work like industry specifically in the UK?
It's a really interesting idea. My true answer is I don't know. My observations are that we have a legacy of office first success stories. So, whether that's from companies like Innocent Smoothies or whatever, like, you can everyone can kind of visualize the big iconic buildings that represent UK industry, which is interesting in and of itself. And I think, whereas I think the countries that are really booming with remote and being agile around their digital nomad visas and all of this, perhaps didn't have that same footprint in offices and in industry in that way, and international connections, etc. And therefore sort of leapfrogged that situation and put a flag in the sand to say, we're here for remote and we're going to really develop around that. Whereas we've got this tension because it's how do we serve this decades of industry and hundreds of years of industry whilst also recognizing this opportunity. So I think that's interesting. I think there is a lot of the visuals and optics around remote are, bright blue skies, beaches, hot weather. And the pandemic has done a lot for kind of staycations and for recognizing the truly beautiful countryside and opportunity we have here. So I live in the southwest, so I'm kind of surrounded by that whole thing of, people coming to enjoy that. So I think it is sort of, it is and will slowly change, but it's a different flavor. And I think what you'll end up with is this sort of interchange, which we've probably always had to some extent, between travel in the UK, across Europe, from companies perhaps with their headquarters in New York or in America coming here, and obviously you've got different teams distributed all over, but as a result you'll get this kind of interplay between them. But it's certainly different. It's more, I would say there's more like a co-working network as opposed to perhaps anything too different to that. And again, that's partly also size, perhaps.
No, I agree. I think I suppose in the UK it feels a bit more sort of like it's the communities and the industries are almost literally that first, and then remote kind of comes into it. Like if you walk into a co-work space in say London, I feel like a lot of it's geared more towards say like tech startups or creative industries, or for people who
absolutely
live in a specific city. Like I was surprised at how many Zelina co-living spaces there are in the UK now. Like, there was one that opened up in Margate of all places in Kent. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Margate, but it was such a random place to then find this co-living all of a sudden.
Yeah.
On the coast of Kent, and then there are a couple, I believe, in Manchester now. So it's interesting how these have popped up, but they don't have the same sort of buzz and that I would say I've experienced from say Mexico City or Lisbon or these other places that are a bit more what we would now class as more digital nomad cities. I completely agree that there is definitely. I'm so glad you touched upon staycations, because that's something that I know for myself. I get asked a lot, like, where is the best destination to go as a digital nomad? And I always say to people, no, try staying away from home. It's somewhere that's down the road from your own home right now first, to see if that is what you would rather do. Because if you want to go sit on a beach, for example, take a holiday, take a vacation. But if you want to actually do this thing, it's actually about having trying this out for yourself first and figuring out where fits best for you and your personality first. So I think,
definitely,
I'm so glad you touched upon staycations first, because I think, although we don't have the loudest remote work industry, I think there's definitely some elements that could maybe be taken away from the experience of remote work and life in the UK.
Yeah, and it's we won a government grant last year to research into the value of corporate bookings for rural accommodation providers, essentially. And so it's sort of like the rung down from the top players who are always going to do really well, and this whole band of like incredible family run places that could benefit from this kind of midweek boost. So it's all the things we've heard a million times over now in different locations. But that does become very interesting, because you sort of flatten out this boom and bust of consumer tourism that we have very much in this country. And, potentially you can create a sort of year-round employment, and you can create all of this alternative economy across a whole year, as opposed to just sort of this really intense experience of like the summer, and then it's like absolutely dead. So yeah, it's an exciting time, and I think there's so much more that can be done, and there are people kind of committed to that. And I think it's we'll see the dots start to join over the next couple of years as well.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that. I think, could you elaborate a little bit more on like how you maybe think that destinations like even the UK, and the UK markets, could benefit from offsites and workations?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we found in that research was just that quite often those providers, perhaps there's something in the back of their head telling them, there's a bit of an opportunity here, but they don't have either the resource, the time, the tweak to their business model, the outside seasonal staff to execute on it. And so, for us, we're a kind of community business, and so we obviously speak to our customers, but we also curate our sort of supplier community, and we have in our articles of association in our business a commitment to the B Corp principles. So we are committed to diversity, but also the sustainability of our supplier community. So identifying them and then helping to present them to the right customers and shorten that process when they may have 20 years experience, speaking to consumer customers is an interesting proposition. And I think the sad fact of the matter is that with climate change as well, there will be a shift in the weather. And so it does open up different opportunities for some of those providers as well. And I think the other trend that we're seeing is we had an article in Skift, and it was like the old world was definitely these kind of all hands where you get like hundreds or even thousands of your employees together. And it's more based around visuals rather than, perhaps true connection. Whereas I think what we're seeing is sort of a delegation down to the team level of teams getting together and connecting. And so perhaps it's maybe smaller little fiefdoms of people getting together, but it is very much about that lateral connection building. And once that starts to happen, it really unlocks some of these incredible like venues set in nature across the United Kingdom. And some of them can feel quite remote, but still be very accessible to cities. And then others like Cabilla down in Cornwall are perhaps a bit further afield, but like incredible thought gone into how they're presented and what the experience is that is provided. So, yeah, I think it's a positioning thing and a chance to kind of extend all that incredible work that's already been done, because we have a great position in tourism, like internationally as on a consumer level, but let's kind of shine a light on what that might mean when we convene teams as well.
Nice. And one final question: what is one thing team leaders need to know about offsites? Apart from do it.
I think I would applaud the words of Chase Warrington and others at Running Remote when they talked about challenging economic times, but they put lines through other things in the budget, but not their offsites, because they felt that it was such a protected investment, and actually it was like really crucial to like the running of the organization. So I think it would be invest in them, and you don't have to do it all yourself. So whether it's using a marketplace like WorkTripp that is free but helps you with some new ideas and being intentional, or you work with us or other partners in terms of taking some of the aspects off your hands, like it is a highly complex task. So, think about how you can break that down, and as a result, like give time to the bits that will take it beyond what you did last time as well. So, but yeah, otherwise just a huge round of applause, because it's no mean feat, but you'll hopefully see that in the fantastic. I heard one speaker at Grow Remote talk about after doing offsites, their NPS score just like went through the roof. So hopefully the dividends will come in how your team connect and feel a sense of belonging to your business as well. So we salute team leaders.
Nice. And the final thing, fill in the blank, home is where?
Oh, I love this. Well, obviously home is where the heart is, but what does that mean? So for me, home is where my crazy family are. So my lovely husband and my two boys and our cat. But also, obviously you've got to have a laptop, you've got to have brilliant music getting you through the day, probably a bicycle. Bicycle's a big one. And just the great outdoors, and any combination of those things in any various parts of the world, and good food is good with me.
Good food is always a must. Sophie, thank you so much for being on The Remote Life. It's been great to chat.
Thank you so much, Han. And hope you have a fantastic rest of your day as well.
Likewise. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Remote Life. And thank you, Sophie, for taking the time to speak with us. You can find links to Sophie's profiles below. Thank you so much again for listening, and we can't wait to remote work with you again soon.